All right, well, everybody, welcome to Stadium Sessions. It's Crowder's new sports podcast show, and hope everyone's doing all right today. I've had a little bit of an interesting day so far. I actually got up here to Crowder at about 9:15, 9:20, something like that. I live about 12 miles away. Anyway, so I walk into the newsroom in the studio area, and then I walk down to the bookstore because I want to get something to drink or get a snack or whatever. Anyway, I reach into my back pocket, and guess what? My wallet's not even there. So I had to drive 12 miles back to my house, get my wallet out of the pants pocket from the pants that I wore yesterday, and drove back up here. Well, anyway, today on Stadium Sessions, we're going to talk a little football. I have the Razorbacks and the Kansas City Chiefs. We're going to talk about them coming up. And also, we'll talk... Actually, this is a story that has really developed after our first episode, and this has to do with NASCAR, and it's about the chase for the Sprint Cup, which did start over the weekend in Chicago. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the show. So you're listening to Stadium Sessions, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Stadium Sessions, Crowder's new sports podcast show. And Amelia, do you watch any football?
Not really. I'm more of a baseball and soccer fan.
So if you do watch football, what team do you root for?
The underdog. I always root for the underdog. No matter what it is, I don't follow the team. I just root for the underdog.
College and professional?
Yeah, I mean, a little Mizzou here and there.
Well, do you think we're going to talk about Mizzou today?
I don't think so.
Who do you think we're going to talk about?
I think you're going to talk about the Razorbacks.
Uh-oh, you're correct. The Arkansas Razorbacks, yes, they're on a pretty hot streak right now. They're 3-0 after their Saturday game against Southern Mississippi Golden Eagles. They defeated the Golden Eagles 24-3 at Razorback Stadium in Fayetteville on Saturday. But it didn't come easy for the Razorbacks, though. They did lose their quarterback, Brandon Allen, who suffered a bruised shoulder injury during the game and was taken out of the game during the first half. So his condition was still unknown if he'll play this weekend against Rutgers. Some media speculates that he might even be out next weekend for the Texas A&M game. But if Allen was to sit out the game, then they do have another quarterback, A.J. Derby, who will be ready for the Rutgers game on Saturday. So Rutgers also does have a quarterback out of Gary Nova, who did suffer a concussion, and a lot of media speculation on Twitter reports that he is on a limited practice schedule and that he could play this weekend, but they're still not sure about that yet. So, but anyway, my thoughts about Arkansas's season so far is that at this time last season, there was a lot of talk going on about the coach John L. Smith, that the Razorbacks, they didn't even know really what was going on with the team. The team did win their first game last season, then lost a heartbreaker at Louisiana Monroe, and that's when the real turmoil started with the team. They only got a few more wins that season. They didn't meet expectations, basically finished out the season bad. And then there was a lot of high hopes for this season when Coach John L. Smith did leave, when Brett Bielema stepped up. He used to coach football up north in the country and actually was a pretty successful coach up there. So a lot of hope did come through Razorback Nation that this coach, Brett Bielema, would actually give Arkansas the light that it needed, the fire that it needed to have a winning season. Because before Bobby Petrino's whole entire scandal happened, Bobby Petrino was a pretty good coach and won a lot of games for Arkansas. And after a scandal, basically the Razorback Nation didn't even know what was going to happen. But I think with the current 3-0 status, Arkansas is looking pretty good, I think. They're still not playing caliber enough to play against nationally ranked Alabama, LSU, but I think they're working towards that, and I really do think Arkansas is going to have a good season. Also, with the Kansas City Chiefs, that's our second team that we're going to talk about for football. They're now 2-0 as well after their defeat against the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday night, 17-16. That was a pretty close game. The Kansas City Chiefs do play against the Philadelphia Eagles this coming weekend. The Eagles are 1-1 for the season against the Kansas City Chiefs 2-0 status. And actually, the Philadelphia Eagles is where the current Chiefs coach Andy Reid used to coach at. So that's going to be a pretty bittersweet game for Coach Reid as he tries to take the Kansas City Chiefs to 3-0 for the season. But you can catch that game tomorrow night, actually. I said this weekend, but it's actually tomorrow night. My apologies. But the game starts at 7:25 Central Time, and that's when kickoff is, so should be a good game. Well, coming up, we're going to talk a little bit more about NASCAR. And actually, there was a lot of things going on with NASCAR after our last show, so we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. You're listening to Stadium Sessions here on the Crowder Century News Network. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Stadium Sessions. It's Crowder's new sports podcast show, and it's time to talk a little bit NASCAR. And this is a story that really continued on through last week after our show aired last week. We talked last week about the chase and what happened in Richmond, which was the final race to the chase. What happened, I'll give you a little recap. Clint Bowyer spun himself out purposely to get a driver into the chase. But later on last week, NASCAR did say that Martin Truex Jr., which is the driver that benefited from Clint Bowyer being spun purposely, was kicked out of the chase. But what happened on Friday, the Friday before the race at Chicagoland, which we'll talk about here in just a second, NASCAR instated Jeff Gordon to be the 13th driver in the chase. And that's the first time NASCAR has ever done that for the chase scenario. So was that fair? That's my question. Was it fair for Jeff Gordon to be instated into the chase and be the 13th driver? And should a Martin Truex Jr. have stayed in the chase and Clint Bowyer been kicked out? Because this is what actually Clint Bowyer's fault that all this happened. So that's my question. Let's fast forward to Sunday night's NASCAR race in Chicagoland Speedway. It was Matt Kenseth that took the victory over Kyle Busch. And now Matt Kenseth has an 8-point lead over Kyle Busch heading into chase race number 2 at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. And you can watch that race on ESPN this Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. And Jimmy Johnson is currently now 3rd in the points as he looks for his 6th championship. And actually yesterday was his birthday. So he gave away a hat on Twitter. So pretty good birthday for him, I think. And it would be an even better birthday present if he took the victory at New Hampshire Motor Speedway this weekend. But actually, Jimmy Johnson, he did pretty good actually at Chicagoland Speedway. He has had a pretty bad month leading up to the chase with some pretty bad luck, but it seems that he's starting to turn it all around now. So hopefully he can keep going for that 6th title. But I know a lot of NASCAR fans don't really want to see him win that 6th title, so should be interesting to see how that plays out this weekend in New Hampshire. And then they go to Dover and just keeps on going until about the end of November, around Thanksgiving, when they finish out the season at Homestead Miami Speedway. So should be pretty interesting to see. All right, well, coming up, we'll talk a little bit about the Crowder MVP and why we didn't feature that today. So that's coming up. Welcome back to Stadium Sessions. It's Crowder's new sports podcast show. And I'm sure you've probably already realized that by now, that it is the new Crowder Sports Podcast show. But anyway, we did have a reason why we didn't feature Jose Valdez. He is our winner for the Crowder Century September Sports MVP. He is on the soccer team, but we didn't have pretty good communication. So we had to postpone his interview until next week. And hopefully we can get him in here next week, because he seems like a pretty good guy, and actually the soccer team's actually doing pretty good right now. So we'll talk a little bit more about the soccer team next week, but that'll be about it for Stadium Sessions for this week. Join us next week, and of course we'll talk about the soccer team and have the interview with Jose Valdez and whatever else happens in the sporting world this weekend. You know, anything can happen. So have a great week and great weekend, and we'll see you next week here on Stadium Sessions.